Gerry Campbell. I'm the CTO of Beachbody, and Jeff gave a little bit of an introduction. You guys know who Beachbody is? Anybody done any of our programs? Push-ups later. We'll see who can do more. It's a great honor to be here today. Telium is a fantastic partner of ours. We've built a huge amount of our infrastructure and our ability to track our customers and understand what they're doing so we can build a great experience. We've based it on the Telium technology, and they've enabled us to do some great things. And what I hope to do in the next little while, I've been given the challenge of inspiring, which inspiring is the fun part. A lot of technical details and a lot of things to come later today and tomorrow. My part's really the fun part, which is just getting to set the context. And the context for the user experience is something I'm super passionate about. As was mentioned, I started off in the internet space pretty much forever ago. It's been an amazing ride. So what I want to do is walk you through a little bit of my experience. I want to talk about the future, and to get to the future, I want to walk through my experience in the very beginnings all the way through today into where we're going and talk about how the user experience is changing with respect to data so that we can get kind of a context, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you all along with me, and hopefully it'll be a little bit of fun too. So I consider myself one of the luckiest guys in the world. I was going to compare myself to Forrest Gump, and then kind of figured that that's probably not, I don't think my ego could take a direct comparison to Forrest Gump. So what I'll do is I'll compare myself to Jim Carrey in Yes Man, where he basically was given tons of opportunities, and he just kept saying yes, and all kinds of crazy stuff would happen. My story starts here in Columbus, Ohio. Anybody ever been to Columbus? Anybody from Columbus? All right, there you go, there you go. It's an awesome place to be from, and I say that tongue-in-cheek a little bit because I left a long time ago, but it's also a fantastic place. This picture is of a place called Upper Arlington, and Upper Arlington is a little small town just to the northwest of Columbus, and there's not a ton going on there, so when we had local heroes, those local heroes really mattered. So if you look, there's a golf course to the left of the pin. That's where Jack Nicklaus learned to play golf, so that's pretty cool. Over to the right, if you look just almost off the screen, is the OSU Horseshoe, which is kind of a cool place. That's an iconic place, very proud to be associated with that. Somewhere in the middle there is where Dave Thomas founded Wendy's, which is, kind of proud of that. And then up at the top pin is a place called CompuServe, and it was the original, very first online service, and it was founded in 1969. And I was 2 years old, and I lived at the other pin. And the reason that's important is, as a kid, as I grew up, I knew I wanted to be in business. My grandfathers were both entrepreneurs, and I knew that I wanted to build stuff. They were engineers. And this local guy who had started CompuServe was fascinating to me. He was a local hero. And his name was Jeff, and Jeff was awesome, and I went to high school with his kids. And as I grew up, went through business school, and figured out, like, okay, I really love this technology thing. I want to go work there. And I had no idea what I was getting into when I started that. This is where the Yes Man story starts. So there's a joke to this. You'll catch it in a minute. This is a CompuServe data center. And these machines, crazy, they were 36-bit machines. And those 36-bit machines ran something that we called the host. And then eventually, because we wanted to be cooler, we called it the cloud. So I started in 1995. We had this crazy idea that this cloud thing was going to be an awesome part of the future. And that led me on a path that ultimately, that's Elon Musk, and that's me not really there with him. But as my path proceeded, I ended up going from CompuServe to Compaq and then to AltaVista. And while I was at AltaVista, we were looking to spin it out from Compaq, and we acquired a company called Zip2. And so, again, weird little thing. I was on the team that acquired Elon Musk's first company, got to meet him before he was whoever he was. So that was kind of an interesting trip. Then I ended up going here and there, and AOL acquired AOL acquired CompuServe, and a bunch of my friends went there. And then AOL acquired Time Warner, which we all know the story of that. It was kind of a mess, but the promise of that was all of this great content, all of these users, this new medium was coming, and I was GM of search at AOL, or was brought in to do that. And so my job was to bring all of this great content into the search context. And so kind of feel like I was a little Forrest Gumpish there, getting to be a part of that. And then the next thing, as I was running search there, we had this opportunity to monetize search, and this company, Google, came along, and they didn't have a paid search product, but we wanted a paid search product. So my business development guy called some guys at this company, Google, and they didn't have AdWords yet, and we said, if you could hurry up and put AdWords together, we'll put it in. And so I got to be Google's first AdWords partner and help define some of what AdWords means. And so that was kind of exciting, and that really was me in the background. Not kidding. Anyways, so then I moved on and did a bunch of different things, and then had an opportunity to be very close to Twitter as Twitter began its rise in 06, 07, 08, and all the way up through 2010. And that was because I was an angel investor, and I was an angel investor in TweetDeck and Surmise, and they were acquired by Twitter at that point in time. So, you know, peeking in the window there, that's pretty much how it felt. So, and then last little bit I'll point out is, in that path, I ended up running technologies globally for Reuters for a couple years, from 2006 to 2008. And what that meant was I got to see giant data in new ways. And the reason I walk you through all of this is to give you a context of where I'm coming from as I tell the rest of the story here. The piece that's interesting, and I'll come back to this later, the frontier for us is that the internet and the data and the experiences that we have are becoming far more personal. And it's not just about this thing that lives out in the cloud. It's not just about this thing that you have in your pocket. It's ultimately becoming very personal. We're going to get down to talking to a little bit about how we instrument our bodies. What does that mean? How do we instrument our brains? What does that mean? And to me, the frontier is the human-technology interface. And that's why I'm so fascinated about Beachbody, and that's why we're super excited to have Telium's help in helping us understand our customers. I'm going to walk you through 4 different epochs. So as I see it historically, there are 4 major time frames. We're on the kind of the crest of the 4th right now. The first one was when we had absolutely no data. And so, you know, we're used to seeing this Wi-Fi signal. There was actually a time before Wi-Fi, right? And there just was no such thing. And we used this crazy thing called a telephone. And when you wanted to get your data and connect up to the internet, and these go back to the early days, you had to take the phone that was hooked up to your wall and stick it into what's called an acoustic coupler. And did anybody have an acoustic coupler? All right, there we go, you're my friends. Yeah, awesome. So what that did for us is allowed us to connect up at 300 bits per second, which was, it was an audible tone. It wasn't even like the handshake tone we heard. But it allowed us to connect up, and this whole new world of connected data all started to happen. And just to give you a context, the phone in your pocket, if you have, you know, it doesn't matter, any phone, you're getting about 133,000 times the speed to your phone right now. So that just shows, as we start to dig in more detail here, the internet started in a place that really had very much nothing. And so the internet experience was from things like the CompuServe internet service, and this was an application. The application lived on, you know, on your hard drive. You would fire it up, and very little data would go back and forth, and it was really hard to get any kind of experience. And what happened was, awesome thing, everybody's heard about Tim Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee took this thing called SGML, which was, I don't even know what it stands for, and created HTML, which was the language that then worked on top of the internet to create what we know as the web today. And that put us kind of off to the races. And what that meant to me, and this is my unique perspective on this, I was at CompuServe in 95, 96, 97, when the internet was this crazy thing that, you know, we were using Gopher and all those things, and we put this web thing on top, and CompuServe bought the Spry browser, the Spry Mosaic browser, and we began to build products on this. And these products that we built allowed people to move a mouse around and click on things, and it was pretty exciting at the time. What also was happening is, in these little pockets here and there, community was building. And community was these people interacting a little bit, and it started off with people, you know, typing, you know, go to menu 1, which would be computer support forums, menu 2 would be IBM, menu 3 would be the Kix platform, right? And I managed one of those communities, and now people got to be personal, and people started to share stories. And there's a little bit of a story in the early days where somebody was a forum sysop, and they got cancer and passed away. And when they passed away, the entire community of this forum had this outpouring of empathy and sadness. And for that to take place in an online community was very new. It was very, very interesting and very amazing. And those same kinds of things were happening on the Well and some other places. And what happened was we were starting to feel this connected life, and this connected life is where we live today, but it's oh so much more than anything could be imagined. CompuServe at the time was about, I don't know, we paid, it was $20 for the box and another $9 per connect time. But the most important thing with all of that stuff was, in this whole era, there was no data. There was absolutely no data. There was no such thing. Wired came along and did something very interesting, which was they created Hotwired, which was one of the very first internet sites. And one of the very first internet sites had one of the very first internet banner ads. So this guy, Joe McCambly, who I had the privilege to work with at one point, is the founder of the banner ad. And the banner ad was the beginning of the days that we know today with respect to data. He created this, have you ever clicked your mouse right here? You will, right? Brilliant. It was awesome. We were doing banner ads too at the time, and I think when we got anything less than a 4% click-through rate, we were really, really disappointed. Love to have that back, right? But I clicked on one. So I had Prodigy. I'm stuck on my little Mac 9-inch thing, and I clicked on the Disney plan a vacation. I wanted to take my girlfriend, who's now been my wife for a while. Wanted to take her on vacation to Disney World. I click on this Disney ad, and I go through this whole nasty 7-page form fill thing where I think I even put my social security number in, who knows what, right? It was awful. And then I was super excited. What happens? Nothing. Nobody ever followed up with me. Nobody ever checked back with me. Nobody tried to sell me anything. Nobody sold my lead 18 times. Nobody took my personal data and threw it into a DMP, right? None of that happened. And it's because we didn't know how to handle it. Nobody knew, like, oh my God, somebody clicked on our ad. Holy crap, what do we do now, right? It was a crazy time. There's another quick illustration I want to give, which was at the time, I was running a part of CompuServe that was about personal pages. And the personal page service was called Our World. You published in the US, and it was available all over the world, right? That's kind of how the internet works. And there was a problem in that something that somebody posted from somewhere in the US was technically illegal content in Germany, right? And the story I'm telling just illustrates how people didn't get the internet and how data and content didn't make any sense. So the German government got all bent out of shape, said, holy crap, we can't have this stuff. It's got to go away. So they put on their stormtrooper outfits, and they ran down to the European office of our company and took all the machines. They took everybody's desktop machines, stuffed them in a van, drove all the way back to their place, and then went back to check and see, and they were outraged that the content was still on the internet, because they thought if the content is showing up in Germany, it must actually be on machines in Germany, and we just took all the machines. I don't understand how this works, right? So they did the obvious next thing, which was to send an extradition order to the United States to bring me to try me in Germany. I'd never been to Germany, right? And so my attorney, the group attorney there, said, hey, are you planning on going to Germany anytime soon? And no, not really. He goes, okay, don't. So, and that just shows how people did not understand what was going on with the internet. And that leads into this era, number 2, which is data is bad, right? Data is bad. Why? Because we started to sell it, right? So the idea of the first online services was that you would build all these content areas, and we would sell the ability to access. People would buy portal tenancies, and these portal tenancies would be giving all of this behavioral data that was in these proprietary systems over. And pretty much every single one of these clicks here and every one of these tiles was some kind of deal that somebody paid a ton of money to try to influence customers and users. And deals were done not necessarily thinking about the best user experience. It was who would pay the most dollars, right? Content within these walls was limited. It was just whatever the internet services wanted to give you. And I had an epiphany. And this is actually Adam Savage. It's not Tom Phillips. But I went to business school with this guy named Tom Phillips, and he looked just like that. We were sitting around one day, and we're talking about this crazy internet thing, and what was it going to be? What was it going to do? How is it going to change the way things worked? And we were pondering. We're like, wow, if everybody can publish, there's going to be more stuff than we know what to do with, right? That's going to create an opportunity. And so I got the crazy idea I wanted to go work in search. I thought searching was going to be a good thing. Business models hadn't been worked out. Nothing had been really worked out. I just had this idea. People are going to publish a ton of stuff. And I want to point out what an amazing time to have said yes. So I got the opportunity to go and be a part of AltaVista as we wrestled with some of the big data questions. And search was the very first big data thing, right? An index at the time, and this would have been, let's say 2000. AltaVista had the biggest search index, and we had 200 million pages in it, which was like astronomical. The day we went from like 180 million pages to 200 million, there was like a party with cake and pizza, right? It was a big deal. Very quickly after that, Google came along within 2 years and had an 11 billion page index. And the difference, and there's a technology step here. What happened was AltaVista was a project that was built to show the power of a thing called the digital or DEC Alpha. And the DEC Alpha was a single machine that had tons of computing power and tons of disk space. And what happened was they built this thing. It had the web page compiled into the web server, so the experience was super fast, and it could only hold as many pages. This single machine could only hold as many pages as would fit on the disk drives, right? So there was just a giant problem. I give the Google guys a ton of credit for solving this problem. Google became the core of what I see as being the internet now and the most important pieces of it, because they solved this horizontal scalability by creating this system that ultimately became Hadoop. We'll talk about that in a second. They were able to take hundreds and ultimately thousands of little small machines and connect them all together and then be able to power the internet that way. And that was super, super pivotal for being able to create the next phase or the next generation of search, which was paid search. So now we've got all of these pieces coming together. And in the world of data is bad, this was very, very important. Because what happened was we were looking at the query from the user to understand their intent. And when we understood the user intent, an ad could be matched to it. And so no longer were we seeing the ads that were punch the monkey ads that were irrelevant and trying to drag you off the site. We were seeing ads as a part of the search experience. And so the ability to plug in and hook up a relevant ad to a user's query turned data into something that was not so bad. It was actually good. So consumer intent began to take over from advertiser intent, and that's really important as we sit here today looking forward. Advertiser intent is awesome. It's fantastic. It's where the money comes from, right? But we also have to balance that against the intent of the user. And I look at the battles going on right now about should people have ad blockers? How do we get around ad blockers? I think that's not the point. The real point is if user intent is what drives the entire system and unlocks that advertising money, how in the world can we expect to torch those users, put pop-ups and banner ads that suck up the whole page and all of that, if we're not respectful of their intent? So the balance that happens is users say, okay, well, I'm just not going to do this anymore. I either won't go to your site or I'll put an ad blocker up. So if you're wrestling with the ad blocker thing, I encourage you, dig deeper, try to understand the user intent on your site, and you'll find a solution that's much better. What happened then was something pretty exciting. We were building referral servers. So before Omniture, there was pretty much no way to track what happened. So you would set up a web page that would refer to another web page and then go to where you ultimately wanted, and a referral server was basically a web server that bounced everybody around, and you would take the web server logs and process those in order to try to figure out where people came from and went to. And it was sloppy. There was no standardization to it. Sometimes you'd drop a pixel on a page and that would give you data. It was super messy. Omniture solved problems, and we started to look at the world in terms of events. What was an event? Was a click an event? Was a page load an event? How many events would be on a page? How many events were important? How many of those events could you actually parse into an understanding that would allow you to build a better experience? And I know from my time using Omniture early on, we gathered way more data than we had the ability to report on. We just wanted it all, and we didn't know what to do with it. So what's great is now, and I love this chart, this shows in 2011, there were 100 marketing technology providers, right? That whole industry that we're all a part of to some degree, I believe, if we're here, is now approaching 4,000 various companies that have solutions in the space. And what's happening there is that data is becoming good, right? From the time when we were afraid of data, from the time that we had no data, now we're moving into the time where we've got the ability to manage it, we've got the ability to build better experiences based on it, and now we don't have to go hide in the corner and not tell people what we're doing. And a quick example. When I was at AOL, I was given the opportunity, to go speak to the Senate Committee on Commerce about personalization. So we had built this program that took a look at your search queries and used that as a way to power advertising recommendations for our banner ads to try to make them more relevant. And it came to the attention of the US government. So I got the opportunity to go and meet with some people and talk about what we're doing. And some principles emerged out of that we were following, because I had really good guidance from our attorneys and from our integrity assurance people. Tell people what you're doing. This is why we're gathering it, to improve your experience. Give people the ability to turn it off. I don't want this, don't do this. We did that. And so that became the foundation of this new data is good. And there were a lot of companies and a lot of people working on this data is good thing, but that's clearly where we live now. And I want to give one example about why data is good. This is Google, and Google, in terms of their history, is fascinating. So they started out with a search engine that was really big. And the really big search engine then began to pack on things like mail and turned mail into a search experience. And they packed on news and they packed on product search. And now you can see that their ramp up, they're building more and more and more information products and gathering more and more data. Now as we move into the world of voice, I saw something in the news today about how Google's tracking every single conversation or capturing it and parsing it. And I think we'll talk in a second about how data can be scary. But this is fascinating in terms of what data is doing to drive new experiences and push things forward. You can't talk about all of this without bringing up Amazon. Amazon released AWS, which every single startup that I've ever bumped into, come across, or potentially looked at investing in is based on Amazon's web services. So EC2, S3, all of the pieces that took Amazon's amazing scale and made that available to people has generated content and data. And then does everybody know this is Hadoop? Would you guys know that? Okay, so Hadoop, do people know what Hadoop is? Yes, nodding heads. This might be the most significant transformation in my mind, it is, since the browser itself. And Hadoop is a generally available architecture that Google is based on that was made available, I think it was in 2008, maybe 2009, and now companies can handle giant amounts of data. This is available to anybody. You don't have to go spend $15 million on a supercomputer. You don't have to go hire a bunch of custom software developers and integrators to build things like artificial intelligence on top of your system or to get to massive scale. The stuff just exists. So average companies, I'll say average people, you have to have training, but people can use the power of these systems and it's available. And this is just a fantastic, fantastic evolution. The next thing is that we all know mobile is skyrocketing. The ability for mobile to weave into our lives and take advantage of all of these data platforms and all of the information that we're gathering is huge. So where does that put us? So in 2020, we will be somewhere around 5.1 devices per person in the world. We will be at 25 billion connected devices at that point in time. And I guess some people won't have internet if I do the math in my head. But even currently today, 10.7 hours are spent in front of a screen. What does that mean? That means if everything is tagged, if every device can be identified, if every user can be identified, if every behavior, if every interest, if every piece of content can be gathered, we end up with this unbelievable opportunity to build value for our customers and for our users. Unbelievable ability. And the awesome thing is that while they're doing their daily lives, they're buying stuff, and they're planning vacations, and they are working at their companies where they buy equipment, and lots and lots and lots of money is exchanging hands. So this is why data is awesome. This is the epoch that we're about to start. We're just moving into the data is awesome world. And I want to pause here for a second and go back to a metaphor that I used early on. I read a book in probably 1995 written by a guy named Nicholas Negroponte. and it was called Being Digital. And he was at the MIT Media Lab. And he painted this future where he said, in the world that is bit-driven, we're going to have just an unbelievable ability to distribute music, an unbelievable ability to distribute content, to educate people, to inform people, to teach languages, to connect with each other. We're going to have this ability in this new digital world to do things that we couldn't ever imagine. I feel like right now, we're just getting to the point, right? We feel like everything's been moving, so fast, but it's so advanced now. I want to put a pin in that and say, we're not that advanced right now. We're nowhere near advanced. We're just getting the tools and the building blocks to really take advantage of this data. We've just got the data systems. We don't know anything really about how artificial intelligence is going to work. We don't really know anything about how all of this is going to come to bear in the future. And what we really don't know is how is it going to impact our bodies. So my example was when I was back in the data center, we had this internet thing that was, cost $10 an hour or $8 an hour to connect to, maybe even more than that. And you had life. And life was lived out on the baseball field and in your school, and never did you ever see a computer, and you maybe got on to connect up to get your email. And now we're right on the edge of where life and data and computing is going to be fully connected. My example for that, and this is why I'm so excited to be at a company like Beachbody, because I feel like we're on the frontier. Workout programs are great, before and after pictures are great. What's really interesting is when you take a look at the gap, the disparity between the things in our lives and our personal being, right? So this is a picture of my truck. It's dusty and it's getting some miles on it, but this is a Ford truck. It's a Ford F-150. When I get in my truck, I turn it on. It tells me what angle it's leaning, front, back, side to side. If I start to turn the wheels, it'll tell me what degree the wheels are turning. If I go a little bit deeper, all of these are devices. This isn't my truck, but this is a car. Every one of these little call-outs is a system under the hood of a modern car. And those systems are all reporting data. What's the pressure in the air conditioning system? Are all the lights working? Is the coolant hot, right? Does the oil need to be changed? Is it low? All of these things, we know so much about our vehicles. We know so much about the things in our lives. Yet, when I go to work out, I put a heart rate monitor on and I'm feeling awesome. I'm feeling super technically advanced because my heart rate monitor puts my heart rate on my Strava app and I can see what my heart rate is. But this really, let's take a second and look at that. How much more important am I than my truck? How much more important is the function of my being than the function of that truck? So I go out and I'm almost 50. I get on my mountain bike and I get my heart rate up over 180 beats per minute. Excuse me, not second. I'd be dead. That would be bad. But is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. My heart rate's always been high. I go to the doctor, and the doctor goes, I don't know. That seems pretty high. Nobody knows anything. No, he's like, well, maybe you should work out less. Maybe you should not work out as hard. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? We don't know anything about bodies. And I want to point out here, that's the frontier. The frontier is how do we take all of these capabilities and move it into not just our physical bodies, but all of the ways that we live, all of the ways that we operate, all of the ways that we interact with everything every day. So the future of customer experience, I like this picture because it's right in your face. It's right there, and it's everything wrapped around us, right? It's everything that we see. It's everything that we do. Data, content, information touches us in every single way going forward. And I was talking to my wife about it the other day, and she was saying, I'm disappointed that our kids spend so much of their time with their heads stuck in their phones. And part of me is like, yeah, I wish they'd go, like I did, go light stuff on fire, and go fall through the ice into the creek and all that kind of stuff. Which actually I kind of do wish they would do that because it's fun. But the other side is it's just a point in time. The point in time when we're stuck in our phones, it's not going to be that way forever. We're going to find that data, information, content, experiences, all the things that we want to sell, all the things that we want to offer will be more naturally integrated into people's lives. And it's going to be more personal, it's going to be more connected, and it's going to be more powerful. And those three things are really, really important. I want to bring up a company. This is an image of a guy who's doing some training. And I actually don't know who it is, but he's using a system that I'm very familiar with. We've got a partner in Santa Monica that's called Peak Performance Project, and it's P3. They do analysis of athletes. So if you are an NBA player, an NFL player, you might go and get these little sticky balls put on you, and you jump around in front of a camera. And that camera, actually it's a set of cameras, very expensive system, that'll take all of your movements and map them. And then tell you, so if for instance, there's an NBA player that wants to get more vertical or is having problems with the knee, they'll do all of that, they'll have them jump and do their vertical, they'll have them do, box jumps and squats and all kinds of things, and it'll give a report. And that report says, okay, here's you're weak in your right hip, your left quad may have had a tear because it's a little bit weaker as well, so do this training and that. And it's run by a doctor, and it's a very complex system, and only elite athletes get access to it, right? That kind of data is fascinating. That same company is now creating a system that you can connect up to your Wii, or it's your Microsoft Kinect. And it's a little app that you can, eventually they'll make it available and you can download it, and you'll be able to do, some jumping jacks and some squats and some movements, and you'll get feedback that will say, here's it comes back in the form of the Vitruvian Man, right? The picture of the guy in the circle with red areas, green areas. Where are you strong, where are you weak? And that kind of data is going to power, and that will be available relatively soon. That kind of data that just last year was only available to high-end athletes is now going to be available to everybody. So instead of just having a heart rate monitor, now there will be the ability for me to see not just how am I moving, but how do I compare against other people of my age, other people of my degree of fitness, my height, my history, my injury history, all of those pieces coming together. And that kind of information, it's one thing to think, okay, well, that's medical. I'm not sure how I market to that. I look at that as an absolute gold mine to provide value to people in completely new ways, right? What's the right workout program for somebody with a shoulder problem? What's the right movement regimen for somebody who is getting older and wants to be able to move a little bit better so they can play with their grandkids? When you build the data profiles, when you build the movement and the muscle strength profiles, over time that's going to get to be a giant asset. The world has none of this right now. So as advanced as we think we are, we have none of it. It's just coming. The next thing is DNA. This is a DNA map. What about diseases? I saw that 23andMe just got the ability to turn on the service where they tell you if you have Parkinson's. That's interesting, right? I'm not sure I want to know, but it opens up a ton of really interesting questions. What does that do for our ability to take care of ourselves? What does that do for our ability to prepare for the future? If I know that I'm going to have Alzheimer's, which is another thing they can tell, that I would have a propensity for that maybe, how would I manage my life differently? How would I prepare my finances? What would be the kinds of companies that would service me throughout my life if I knew that I have certain things? It's all really spooky, it's all really scary, but we have to accept that it's coming. We're going to be more connected. I actually 4 or 5 years ago got really fired up about the Internet of Things, and I'll show you something in a second. I think that we're at the point where it's got to either really work out and make a big impact, or it's going to fade a little bit. But as the hype around the Internet of Things builds and has kind of hit its plateau, what's happening now is that garage doors can open and close from my phone, and I can connect up, I can control my pool. All of the data that's generated in my daily life is really very interesting. How could that be built into my profile? How could that be built into something that marketers could reach me for? How would I want them to use that, right? There are a lot of questions around this. There are a lot of ethical questions, which is if you're capturing this data. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a company that was doing a web-controlled adult toy. And they were capturing the data on the the web-controlled adult toy and using that to improve the products. When do people turn it on? What strength do they like, right? How often do they use it? How long do they use it? All of those questions come up, and it was a big deal. They got in big trouble. There was a settlement. I believe there was a settlement because they were using the data improperly. There are a lot of questions around how this is going to come. Another one that I think is really, really powerful as the web and as the data that we use to power our lives becomes more and more a part of things. This is a quick augmented reality snapshot. A couple things out there. I got Google Glass when they first came out, and I was in the airport in San Francisco, and I had them on feeling like, I'm a super advanced technology guy, and this was right when they came out. And I found that there were a bunch of guys, like all businessmen, and it was in San Francisco, so you think there'd be patience for this, but they're all like looking at me and like snickering and pointing. I think we're a long way away from finding out exactly how augmented reality is going to work. Who's going to wear a headset? Do people want to be recorded? The Snap glasses starting to record or opening a bunch of questions. But ultimately, we will end up at the point where not only is the data captured seamlessly from the activity we do as the exhaust back to the home, my home creates exhaust, but that data then is all going to come back in to power what I do. I like this example. I'm a mountain biker, so the idea that I could know the grade of the road that I'm riding on and my heart rate and all of these other things seamlessly in the glasses that I wear, that's really cool when you think about how that might come to bear on somebody who's driving, somebody who's sitting at their desk working, somebody who's out of the office and maybe sitting in a meeting. All of the ways that these experiences are going to penetrate, for good or for bad, into our lives are going to happen. And the more powerful question is fascinating to me. I mentioned before, we generate all this data, right? It all goes into these giant, huge cloud-based data systems. And we end up with all these huge, massive data points. I just recently learned that there's a company out there that is, it's an advertising company that does programmatic ad buys. And what they're doing is they're putting in bids, and as they put in their bids, they bid high, so they get user profiles sent across. They throw those into their DMP, and they're building, somewhere in the realm of millions of profiles per day. And I think that's kind of disingenuous, right? Because what they're doing is they're saying, I want to bid for this ad, so you give me the profile, but they're not actually buying the ad spot. They're using that to build their profile, but they're ending up with this giant data set that they're going to be able to use for targeting and things. And what's interesting in all of that is we have a choice of how we use it. Artificial intelligence is going to drive an understanding, a way to build algorithms. And I was talking with a PhD in algorithms friend of mine, and I was asking him, explain it to me as a layman. What is machine learning? And he said, basically, it's math. It's math that says, take this case and that case and look for this and do some statistics, and ultimately you will get a very small subset of things, and then you can test that, and you can say, when people come to my site, when they do these things, if they have this profile, then serve this up, test the hypothesis. They may want to look at, if I have a car site, they want to look at Chevrolets rather than BMWs or Mercedes, right? And all of those things start to come together. We could never make those recommendations with the amount of data we have because it's just too big. Machine learning is going to be something huge for us. I want to put a pin in the idea here. I think there really are questions. It's easy to dismiss the idea that machine learning is dangerous. It's easy to say, oh, that's science fiction. If you're intrigued by that, take a look. There really is some dangerous stuff out there. And I'll use Chase Bank as my example. Is anybody from Chase here? That's either going to be good or bad. So the Chase Bank fraud protection algorithm is not my friend. Somewhere it decided I was a high-risk guy and my family was high risk. And so every time my sons, they're 13 and 16, and every time they use their card, because it's very infrequently, they've got kids checking, kids' debit card accounts. The fraud detection algorithm, which is an artificial intelligence algorithm, looks at that transaction and determines that it's fraud. And in fact, it was New Year's Eve. I was buying about $1,000 worth of champagne, beer, and liquor or whatever because we were having a party. And I'm standing at the checkout with a giant cart, and it decided it was fraud. Right? So that fraud detection algorithm is supposed to be serving us. It's supposed to be something that's useful to us. I call the bank and go, hey, would you stop turning my card off? This is something that's bad. And the answer I got back is really scary, and it's really telling. After pushing through from the offshore call center to somebody in the US to somebody who's boss in the US, she admitted to me they've lost control of their fraud detection algorithm. Right? So when I said, can you please just go in and tweak and say transactions of this amount, or if I'm in this geographic area, she goes, yeah, that would be awesome, but we really can't do that anymore. We don't have control over that anymore. So just something to keep in mind. Be wary, be clear. The thing that's really scary, I was talking, again, to my PhD pal, he said, most artificial intelligence algorithms or most machine learning doesn't create an audit trail. It doesn't, at this stage in the game, most implementations can't tell you why they make the decisions they make. So you show up on Amazon and it says, here's some penguin slippers. Why, right? Why are those penguin slippers? Don't really know. That's what it decided you wanted to have today. And so as we deploy these systems, as we look at how our technology is being used and how the data is being used, be very aware that these technologies might lead us astray. And in the category of more powerful, this is my dog Mo. I want to point out something that's very interesting to me. As life becomes more connected, as we become more a part of the information and the computing power available to us, cool things are possible. My dog Mo he was trained to ring bells when he wanted to go out, and he's not a smart dog. It took him like 18 months to learn to be potty trained. He's an idiot. He's sweet, but he's an idiot. And I got this idea. If I connected an easy button up to a switch and hooked that up to that little box there, and I did all this programming myself, which I felt quite proud of. I trained him so that when he wants to go out, and I don't do this anymore because I got bored with it, but I put an easy button by the back door, and I put an easy button by his food dish, and I put an easy button by the door that we go out to go to the car. And then I connected that box up through the internet to a texting program. So whenever he wanted to eat, he'd walk over and smack the button, and I would get a text that said, Mojo wants to eat. And so, okay, right? So when we go feed the dog, Mojo wants to go outside. Mojo wants to go for a car ride. And I felt, it's kind of funny. It was awesome. He was really demanding. I'd be sitting at work and miles and miles away. In fact, at that point in time, I was traveling quite a bit. And my wife would be like, the damn dog is hitting the button all the time. And I'd be in a meeting and be like, I want to eat. I want to eat. It's very funny. But it was crazy. I felt more connected to my dog. Like he could express to me in 3 different ways what he was interested in, what he wants, right? Think about that, like the connection to a pet, the connection to inanimate things, the connection to a company, a service, or anything that gets down to the level of these quick, instant bites of information is really, really powerful. With this comes more responsibility, and I want to talk about GDPR for a second. The reason does everybody know what that is? It's the European data standards, data protection. We're all going to be subject to it in the US if we do any business overseas, particularly in Europe. Very tight controls around how user data is handled. What can be captured? How is it exposed? How is it forgotten when the user wants to be forgotten? These rules are coming up because there are bad practices out there. There are companies who are taking advantage of users. There are companies who aren't thinking of their users as humans. They're not thinking of their users as people with intent. They're not thinking of their users as anything other than a dollar sign and maybe the ability to pull money out. So GDPR is something, you're going to hear more about it if you haven't yet. I think it's really awesome because it forces us to think about how we're handling our data and how we're handling our relationship with our customers. And now our challenge, we've gone from the dial-up all the way to the world where everything's flying all over the place. The challenge for all of us is, if you're here right now, you are involved in companies that are serving customers, and we have the chance to make a permanent mark. All the way back to my crazy adventures in my career and saying yes, and just showing up and continuing to agree to all these crazy things that happen, this is one of those times. The epoch that we're beginning, where data is awesome, is one of those times where we all have the chance to make a mark. I look back and say, I had no idea when I was on the team that acquired Zip2 that we were giving Elon Musk the first amount of cash that was going to let him go be a part of PayPal and start Tesla, right? There's no way to know all of these things, but I'm telling you, when we sit here at this point in time looking forward, this epoch is huge. So you're going to make a permanent mark. What kind of permanent mark is it going to be? Are you going to make a positive impact, or are you going to be something that has to be regulated against? So, principles for the next epoch. Be transparent. Whatever you capture on your users, whatever you do for them, whatever you do on their behalf, do it transparently. Let them know what you're doing. A search query matches the advertising that's related to it, and it's good for the user. That's awesome. That business model is sorted out. Retargeting helps the user find what they're looking for after they maybe left the site and forgot that they were interested in buying something. All of those things are good. Be transparent. Be constructive. Being constructive means be of service to the user. Make sure that you're remembering that balance. The world where we're at with ad blockers now shows that things are out of balance. Users are saying, I don't want your ads anymore because they're intrusive to my experience. This is not something that's good. That's not constructive. So instead of responding with the continuous war to disable ad blockers and all of that, maybe get under the intent. What's really going to drive value enough that the user wants to be a part of the business model of your site or your company? And be polite. Being polite is a huge amount of this, right? We're humans. To go back to the picture with all the question marks, we're all humans. We can't lose the humanity in what we do. We can't forget that people are connecting online and it's changing their lives. We can't forget at Beachbody that people's before and after pictures that we're helping to power through our streaming service, that is their life, right? They come to us because they want help losing weight, to empower themselves in their own lives. Our job is to be polite, to be respectful, to help them on their journey and help them be what they want to be through the use of our products and services. And if we're polite, respectful, transparent, constructive, it's going to be fantastic and positive going forward. And so I like this picture. I'll wrap it up on this. There's huge chaos right now. Not really sure. The reason I set with principles going forward is that there's no roadmap. But one of my favorites is Sun Tzu. In the midst of chaos, there is opportunity, and that's kind of how I feel. So thanks for the time. Thanks for letting me talk. I really appreciate all the attention, and this has been a great honor. Thanks.